Days like this are amazing. It's a great reminder of everything that's coming, that's ahead. I was just talking to Jeremy Lucchini, who's the final speaker. You want to stick around. And he said it's like a country club for cool shit. Days like this. He was telling some of his investor friends to come and check out the talks, because if you don't understand product design, you got to come see what this stuff's all about. And it's just a great reminder that we really stand at the edge of an incredible time, right? We're talking about privatized space exploration, colonizing other planets, the return of zeppelins, autonomous flying drones, inflatable structures, hyperloops, smart houses that know when to water your plants and feed your kids, or personal entertainment devices like T talked about that know your innermost desires. The challenge is not the software, though. I know most of you are software folks. I'm going to stand here and say it's not about the software. We can create incredible things on the screen. The challenge is actually turning those pixels into atoms, to physically creating the shit that you can hold in your hand that's going to get you down the street and keep you safe. And so that's what I want to talk about today, is really a call to action for everybody here that's in the hardware and product development world to rethink how your stuff is made. If you're not thinking about how you can retool your supply chain, how you can rethink your supplier network, you face a massive risk. And it goes all the way back to the beginning of automated manufacturing. So we're still doing things in a linear, serial fashion, much like Henry Ford did with the first assembly line. All we do to scale up is we add more people in the line, we add more machines to the line. But what that does is it just creates more waste, it's more inefficiency, and it actually creates less flexibility. Our entire method of production is predicated on the idea that we can anticipate consumer demand. And that's why we have warehouses and landfills full of shit that people don't want and they don't need, because we have to scale up these massive production capacities in anticipation of next Christmas's hot item. It's a fundamentally flawed system. And when you couple it with the shit that's going on with the lunatics in charge right now and this escalating trade war, it's really a big problem for product developers. I know when I first saw the news about the tariffs, I was dismissive. I think everybody else was. Oh, what's this really mean? It's only on raw materials. This isn't a big deal for everybody. But I'm here to tell you today that this is very real, and it's impacting product developers already. We've seen 250 billion in Chinese exports already go under US tariff. That's almost half. He's threatening to put the other 257 billion under tariff as well. You don't think these guys are retaliating? They are, and it's coming fast, and it's coming hard. The Purchasing Managers Index in China this last month moved from expanding to contracting for the first time in 3 years. The example that really made it concrete for me, though, is just yesterday, we were talking to a small consumer electronics developer here. They're about 3 years old. They're doing about 1,000 units a month. They're working on some really cool stuff. Amazingly talented team. They started the year, their import tax on cost of goods sold, so that's their entire product is manufactured in China. The cost of goods is what they were taxed on. The beginning of the year, it was 0.5%. So they're not a big deal, hadn't changed for years, 0.5%. When the new stuff got rolled out in the spring, that moved to 10%. Just recently, it's now at 25%. They're looking at a cost of goods of about 250 bucks. So 3-year-old company, think of what that does to their profitability. Think about what that does to their ability to compete to the market. But also think about what that does to the consumer, right? If they're going to survive that, they've got to protect their margins. Consumer prices go up, and it impacts everybody. I want to tell another story. So this is another small consumer electronics manufacturer, Carbon Audio. These guys are from Portland, Oregon. They were. And they were ahead of the game. So they had the first Bluetooth speaker that was featured in Apple stores. This thing was impeccably designed, incredible sound quality. You could slide it onto the top of the iPad. They nailed it. They met with all the top execs at Apple. They said, we love this. We want to feature this in Apple stores everywhere. And they were. They actually sold out in Apple stores. Huge success story. These guys were flying high. They signed a contract with Walmart. They signed a contract with Target. Doesn't get any better than that, right? You're a small startup, 5-person company. You're going into Target, you're going into Walmart. But what happens, Walmart and Target don't know how to place the product. They look at the price point, they look at the box, they put it in the closed glass case for high-end electronics. So none of the customers get to see it, none of the customers get to know what it sounds like. 6 months later, these guys are out of business, and they're actually still paying the contract manufacturer that they signed up to do this massive run of production. So they're sitting in their homes paying with credit cards for delivery of product that their company has folded, they can't sell, and they're having to take out a storage unit to store what's actually a really amazing product. Right? It's a horrible story, but it's also really enlightening because it tells a lot about the implications of supply chains. And it's not something we think about often in the design and engineering world, is how this stuff really gets made. Like, what are the intricacies of how we bring these products to market? But they're just that. They're physically chains, and they're built link by link. They're very linear, they're very static, much like we talked about with the introduction of the assembly line. And what happens is when a single link breaks, you can see catastrophic failure. And the massive supply chain companies that run this industry, there's only a few of them, they're still doing it on email, they're doing it on PowerPoint, and they're doing it on spreadsheets. $13 trillion industry, and it's all run on 50-year-old technology. The challenge is setting up supply chains is hard. It takes a lot of deep expertise, it takes a lot of trips to China, it takes a lot of understanding of how to determine what's a good factory, what's not a good factory, spending time on site. Often the companies we talk to have more people in their supply or global supply chain management teams than in their engineering and design teams. It's been totally baffling to me coming over from the design world to see this. But those teams need deep expertise, they need deep knowledge, and they really struggle. Like, they're losing their minds because they're seeing that they can't keep up with the demands of their engineering and department teams because people have to get products to market quicker. We all know that. They can't keep up with the changing supply in the market. Their vendors are changing prices. Some of them are managing 47 different vendors just for the mechanical components in a relatively small BOM. It's incredibly complex. So what happens is only the biggest players are able to really be successful in this space. So the big boys like Apple and Intel, they've got it figured out, right? They've been able to invest the massive resources that are necessary to create fail-safe systems, to create multiple options, to be able to spin one supplier up when one supplier goes down. And these guys are on both ends of the spectrum, right? So Apple, they do everything outsourced. So their biggest, I would argue, their biggest IP or their biggest competitive advantage is not their design, is not the look and feel of their products. It's the fact that they can bring to market incredibly high quality products incredibly quickly at massive volumes with all of the marketing cachet that goes behind it. You could argue that their strongest advantage is really their ability to manage a supply chain. The other end of the spectrum is Intel, where they do everything themselves. So they will fabricate an entire 5-story, $3 billion wafer fabrication plant. So they figure out every single detail, and then they replicate that plant around the world so they can control every single aspect of that. Bad news is, most of the product development companies that are doing really interesting stuff are not Apple and Intel. Sorry if there's any Apple or Intel folks in the audience. So in order to see the kind of market change, the new innovation, the options we want as consumers, these product development companies have to find a different way. And the answer isn't necessarily in speed. It's not in having a crystal ball and trying to predict what's the next crazy tweet that's going to come out and what's that going to do for public policy and tariffs. It's really about agility. It's about flexibility. And to get to the point of agility and flexibility, these product development companies have to transform from kind of the slow, lumbering semi-truck that they are now into more of a flexible, weaponized, ass-kicking Autobot, right? So they've really got to rethink everything about how they're doing supply chain, and that means taking advantage of every tool that's at their disposal. They've got to think about how they can leverage data, how they can access real-time insights on how the products are made. Ultimately, they've got to fundamentally rethink the way that they're bringing stuff to market so that they don't fall the same victim to the same stuff that we saw with carbon audio. So that requires a move to distributed networks. So I think we're all familiar with the impact that distributed networks are having on industries like transportation, industries like lodging, real estate, legal, dating. It's a well-known fact that this stuff is changing the way marketplaces interact. And fundamentally, it's just about communication. It's about disintermediation of somebody in the middle that slows things down and replacing it with a simplified application or an interface that streamlines that communication. The other aspect that we start to think about with supply chains is moving to more of a biologically inspired model. So systems that are fail-safe, systems that are redundant, systems that have the ability to self-heal, self-regenerate, and find new pathways. Ultimately, all you're doing is you're talking about taking resources, reconfiguring them, and then distributing them. And so when we talk about this new model for supply chain management, we think about more like supply networks or supply ecosystems, where it's not a linear chain, where consumer product developers have multiple options. They have different places they can go. And so at Fictiv, this is really core to our mission. This is what we're all about. Our mission is to help make manufacturing tools accessible to everyone. And we see that the core of this is being able to fundamentally transform this paradigm of how supply chains and manufacturing processes work today. So we're working with Fortune 500 companies all the way down to two-person startups, from first-run 3D printing prototypes all the way out to millions of injection molding units. And we're not doing it with PowerPoint or email or Excel spreadsheets. We're doing it with advanced technology, algorithms that help us match latent capacity within our supply network to the sophisticated demands of our customers. And we're doing it with a software technology approach first, really focusing on collaboration and communication, but we're also doing some really interesting stuff in computational geometry, being able to predict parting lines, detect thin and thick walls in injection molded parts, automated cost estimating for CNC so that customers can get quotes in hours, not days. We can deliver parts in days, not weeks and months. One of my favorite examples is, I'm going to read this to you guys because we got this earlier this week. So this is a medical robotics company, and they're working on some really sophisticated laparoscopic robots. So this is stuff that's going to change people's lives. If any of you have ever sat in the waiting room while a loved one was in surgery for an extended period of time, this is exactly what they're doing, is they're speeding up that surgery time. Their board just mandated that they cut their time to market in half because there's so much competition in this space. We started to win their business because we were able to cut one of their 5-axis CNC Type 2 anodized robotic knuckles from 16 weeks to 16 days. That's actually what got us on the attention of the board of directors. So I'm going to read this directly to you. Fictiv team, without further delay, I'd like to show you the work Jesse S. did assembling the parts you delivered on, and then I pixelate the name of the project so it stays confidential, for round 1. The accelerated schedule on the parts that you have thus delivered has greatly improved our ability to learn and reduce work down the road. Thank you for the continued support and delivery that enables the team to just crush. Love that. Though we know we have work ahead, this right here is reason to believe we're on the right track. So pumped. You can't ask for a better email from a customer than that. It's incredibly rewarding to do this stuff. The customers love it. And on the back end, all of the suppliers really love it as well because we're able to channel new business through these machine shops and these injection molding shops that have latent capacity because they don't have sales and marketing teams. And so in closing, I just want to ask you all to help me make this change. You don't use payphones anymore. You don't use taxis. So why are you still using the same old supply chain and manufacturing processes to bring products to market? That's all. Thanks. I'm going to turn it over to Chris.